Okay, let's cut through the noise. There's just so much information out there, right?
Absolutely overwhelming sometimes.
And knowing what's important, getting up to speed quickly, that's really the goal here.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
we do in the deep dive. And you've given us some really fascinating sources today. They all circle around this one core idea
Mm.
that what happens when we actually teach computers about time?
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, how adding that temporal layer can seriously change how NLP models understand text.
It really can. Context is just so crucial in language and time. Well, time is maybe the most fundamental layer of context, even when it's invisible.
Right.
Think about when something was written or when an event happened, even how words change, meaning over centuries.
Yeah.
It all shapes how we understand things.
Yeah, definitely.
And these sources, they really walk us through how researchers are making this explicit, uh, building time into the models
Hmm.
and the results.
Yeah.
Sometimes quite surprising.
So, our mission today for this deep dive, let's unpack these sources. We want to figure out, what kind of time information actually helps.
Mm.
How are researchers getting models, which usually just look at words to understand time? And crucially, what's the real world impact? Does it make search better? Classification? Can we really see language changing?
And it's not just theory. That's
Yeah.
important to stress.
Yeah.
The papers you sent over have concrete methods, experiments, actual results. Time is becoming a real usable feature in NLP.
Okay, so time. Seems simple, right? A line moving forward.
Mm.
But looking at these sources, it's clear researchers are thinking about it in, well, several different ways. What are the different sort of flavors of time they're working with?
Yeah, that's a great starting point. It's not just one thing. The sources show us a few key types. Think of them like different clocks the models are learning to read.
Okay.
First, there's the most straightforward, the document timestamp. When is this news article published?
For the tweet sent or the email.
Yeah, exactly. That metadata time. Several sources really focus on this, using the time the text itself actually appeared in the world.
Right.
Then, distinct from that, you've got the temporal stuff inside the text itself,
Right.
what some papers call content time.
Like if it mentions yesterday or last week or a specific date.
Precisely, December 25th, 2021, things like that.
Yeah.
NLP tools can actually pull these out and standardize them, turn next Tuesday into an actual date interval.
Got it.
Then there's a broader view, looking at historical periods, grabbing text from the 1800s versus text from the 1990s.
To see how things changed between those times.
Exactly. How language evolves,
Yeah.
how word meanings shift.
Hmm.
Several sources dive into that, looking at sound changes over time or how languages diverge
Yeah.
using these big time slices.
Okay, that makes sense. What else?
Related to that hypnotical view, one paper looks specifically at the time gap between two texts.
How far apart they were written.
Yeah. Is this document from last week and that one from 10 years ago?
Yeah.
That distance itself turns out to be useful information for some models.
Huh. Interesting.
And finally, for some types of texts, like, say, literature, researchers look at the temporal order of things within the text.
Like the sequence of events.
Kind of. Treating the text less like a jumble of words and more like a sequence unfolding over its own internal timeline. One source mentions this for text classification.
Wow. Okay. So document time, content time, historical periods, the gap between texts, even the sequence inside. It's a lot of different ways to think about time.
It is a rich landscape, as you said.
So how do they actually, teach computers this? How do you get these different clocks into models that weren't really built for time?
Right. This is where the clever engineering comes in, and the sources show a whole range of approaches.
Okay, later.
Well, one method is almost deceptively simple, but apparently quite effective.
Yeah.
Just add the date. Literally stick the date information, like 2023-10-26, right at the beginning of the text before you feed it to the model.
Like a prefix. You just tell the model the date up front.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like giving it a little timestamp label. One paper found this often worked just as well as much fancier methods. Simple, but effective.
Okay, wow. What else? More complex stuff.
Sure. Building on that, you can train specific numerical codes, embeddings, for the date parts.
So instead of text, you give it a special vector for the year, another for the month.
Right. And you combine those date vectors with the regular word vectors. So the model gets both linguistic and temporal input signals.
Makes sense. And what about for search? You mentioned extracting time from the text content earlier.
Yeah, that's key for search. Use NLP tools to find all the time mentioned July 2023 last week during the conference, and represent the document or your search query by these time intervals.
So the search engine can match not just keywords, but also the relevant time periods.
Exactly. It figures out the temporal scope and tries to align the query's time with the document's time.
Cool. What about the really advanced language models? Are they learning time more deeply?
They are. Some researchers are baking temporal understanding right into the model's training.
How? Like giving it time-based quizzes?
Kind of, yeah. During pre-training, you might ask the model to predict the document's original publication date. Or you mask out a time word, it happened mask morning, and make the model guess yesterday or this.
So it learns the patterns of how time is expressed and used.
Precisely. It builds an intrinsic understanding of time alongside its language understanding. One source details specific pre-training tasks for this.
And that idea about the time gap between documents, how does that fit in?
Right, another training technique involves explicitly using that gap. They design the training so the model learns to make representations for documents written close together in time more similar.
And representations for documents written far apart less similar.
You got it. Using a special kind of mathematical penalty, a loss function, based on that time difference.
Clever. And for language change, how do they compare, say, Shakespeare's English to modern English?
That often involves training separate models or separate word embeddings on data from each specific time period. So you get a snapshot of the language for the 1600s, another for the 1800s, another for today.
But how do you compare them if they're separate?
Ah, that's the tricky part. Aligning those different historical snapshots, those embedding spaces, so you can track how a word's position or meaning changes over time. That's a big challenge. Others use different methods, like measuring how surprised a modern model is by historical text.
Okay. And the last one you mentioned, the temporal order within literary texts.
Yeah, that involves looking at the sequence, how terms correlate or appear over the course of the text itself, not just their overall frequency. They combine that kind of sequential analysis with other techniques to help classify the text.
Okay, it's really fascinating. So many different angles they're taking to inject time awareness. But the big question, does it actually help? Does adding time make these models better at their jobs? What's the payoff?
Absolutely. And the sources are pretty clear on this. The payoff is significant, and it shows up across a whole range of different NLP tasks.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Okay, take text classification. Adding date info. It boosts accuracy. One study showed models got better not just on data from the time they were trained on, but even on classifying documents written later.
Wait, really? So a model trained on, say, 2020 news does better on 2022 news just because you tell it the date of the 2022 article?
Seems so. It suggests the date itself carries some signal about the type of content or the style that generalizes. The same paper actually connects the improvement to how much information the date provides about the category, something called mutual information. And other work confirmed that analyzing temporal patterns within texts helps classification too.
Okay, that's compelling. What about search? You hinted it was the big one.
Huge. Search or information retrieval. If you explicitly model time for both the query and the documents, you get much better results, especially for queries where time matters.
Like what happened yesterday?
It's exactly. Or best laptops released last quarter. Models that understand time intervals and can rank documents based on temporal relevance using techniques like temporal BM25 or matching time intervals, they just work better for these kinds of searches. Big improvements shown on standard test datasets.
I can definitely see that. What else?
Well, understanding language change. This is where temporal models really shine. You can track how word meanings drift over centuries by seeing how their vector representations change in those time-sliced models we talked about.
So you can literally see a word changing its meaning.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Or trace historical sound changes. One paper used character-level analysis to show evidence of sounds like P becoming B in Danish over time. You can even measure how related different languages or dialects are and how that relationship changed historically.
It's like archaeology, but for language, using time as the key.
Great analogy. And, maybe less surprisingly, these models are great at document and event dating. If your goal is to predict when a document was written or when an event mentioned inside it happened,
Then telling the model about time is obviously going to help.
right. Models that use both the document timestamp and the time expressions found inside the text are particularly good at this. They significantly outperform models that ignore the temporal dimension.
Okay, the benefits seem really clear then. Better classification, much sharper search, incredible insights into language history, accurate dating. But it can't be that easy, can it? Are there hurdles, challenges the researchers ran into?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's not just plug and play. The sources are honest about the difficulties.
Like what?
Well, one thing is picking the right level of detail for time. Do you use the exact day, just the month, the year?
Does it matter?
It seems to. One study found that for searching temporal information, using month-level granularity often worked best. Too fine-grained might be noisy. Too coarse might lose important details. The best choice can depend on the specific task and the data.
Okay.
What else? Normalization. This came up particularly for search, when you're combining a score based on text relevance with a score based on temporal relevance.
They might be on totally different scales.
Exactly. One might range from 0 to 1, the other from -100 to +1000. If you just add them together without properly normalizing them, putting them on a common scale, the bigger score can completely dominate and you get skewed results. It's a crucial step.
Right, like comparing apples and oranges. Makes sense.
And then there's the messiness of historical data. Old texts scanned with OCR can have errors. Spelling wasn't standardized for a long time. Places had different names.
So the model might see London and Londinium and not realize they're related.
Precisely. Or different spellings of the same word across centuries. This noise makes it much harder for models to track concepts or words reliably across time.
Yeah, I can see that being a headache.
Also, some sources point out that language change isn't always neat and linear. It can be complex, nonlinear. Models assuming simple trends might miss things.
Right.
And remember that simple date prefix trick.
Yeah, the one that works surprisingly well.
Well, a potential catch is that models trained like that might only work well if you remember to give them the date prefix when you actually use them. Forget the prefix, and the performance might tank. It becomes dependent on that specific input format.
Ah, okay, so there are definitely things to watch out for.
Yeah.
Right, that was a really comprehensive dive. We've seen all these different ways time can be captured, timestamps, content mentions, historical slices, gaps, sequences, and the clever ways researchers are building this into models, from simple prefixes to complex training tasks. And the impact seems huge. Better classification, search, understanding language evolution, dating things accurately. So let's zoom out. Why should you, listening now, really care about all this? What's the big picture takeaway?
Well, the core idea, I think, is that text just doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? Everything we read, everything we write, it has a when. It's tied to a moment or a period, explicitly or implicitly. So for you, just interacting with information online or anywhere else, it means the technology is getting smarter about that when. You should expect increasingly better search results, especially when time is part of your query.
Finding that specific news report or reviews from a certain year?
Exactly. Searching archives, product reviews, news feeds. These temporal models can understand your time needs better and pull the right stuff from the right time.
And if you work with text data yourself.
And this opens up new possibilities for more accurate and, frankly, more insightful analysis. You can classify documents better by leveraging time. You can spot trends you might have missed before. You can even do sophisticated analysis on how language is shifting in your specific field or area of interest.
Using time as another lens for analysis.
Precisely. Ultimately, these models that understand time are getting closer to understanding the full context, not just the words, but the when.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big step towards AI that doesn't just process words, but grasps their meaning within their historical and temporal setting.
It really shows that time isn't just this simple background thing. It's a feature, a powerful one, that adds so much depth and meaning to text.
Yeah, by building it explicitly into the models, we unlock a whole new level of capability for understanding information.
It definitely makes you think, what else? What other subtle context, things we usually ignore, might be hiding really crucial information in all the data swirling around us?
That's a great question. Something to keep pondering as you navigate that information landscape.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.